The security camera at St. Catherine's Elementary School recorded everything, every moment, every movement, every breath. But at 2:47 p.m. on that Tuesday afternoon in September, it captured something that would shatter everything the faculty believed about miracles, about children, and about the thin line between heaven and earth. 8-year-old Marcus Henderson was walking across the courtyard alone, his small fists clenched, tears streaming down his face. He had just been sent out of class for the 3rd time that week. Another outburst. Another moment where the rage inside him exploded like a volcano, spilling onto everyone around him. The other children avoided him now. Teachers whispered about him in hallways, their voices dropping to concerned murmurs whenever he passed by. His parents were too busy destroying each other in bitter divorce proceedings to notice their son was drowning in pain that no 8-year-old should ever carry. The courtyard was empty at that hour. Most children were in afternoon classes, their voices echoing faintly from classroom windows. The autumn wind rustled through the oak trees that had watched over generations of students, their leaves just beginning to turn golden. It should have been peaceful. It should have been safe. Before we go deeper into this mystery, take a moment to subscribe to Virgin Mary Mysteries. Stories like this are too powerful to experience alone. Marcus stopped in front of the statue that had stood in that courtyard for 30 years. The Virgin Mary, carved from white marble that had weathered countless storms, her hands extended in eternal compassion, her face serene despite decades of playground noise, scattered prayers, and the countless tears of children who had sought comfort at her feet. Students had gathered around this statue for generations, finding solace in her presence during their darkest moments. Some left flowers, others whispered prayers. Many simply stood in her shadow and felt less alone. But Marcus wasn't seeking comfort. Marcus was seeking a target for the pain that felt too enormous for his 8-year-old body to contain. His parents' screaming matches echoed in his head. His classmates' rejection burned in his chest. The teachers' disappointed faces haunted his thoughts. All of it swirled into a rage that demanded release. Without warning, without hesitation, he drew back his leg and kicked the base of the statue with all the fury his small frame could muster. The sound cracked across the courtyard like thunder. The camera captured the exact moment of impact. It captured Marcus's face, twisted with anguish and desperation. It captured the violent collision between his small foot and ancient marble. But what the camera captured next would change everything. What happened in that split second after his foot touched stone would force everyone who saw the footage to question the very nature of reality itself. Because the statue moved. Not the way stone moves when struck, something else entirely. Marcus Henderson hadn't always been the child that teachers feared to see walking through their classroom doors. There were photographs in his mother's albums that told a different story. A laughing toddler with bright eyes, a kindergartner who brought flowers to his teacher, a little boy who once believed the world was safe and full of wonder. But that was before the screaming started. Before his father moved into the apartment across town, before his mother began working double shifts to afford the lawyer fees, before Marcus learned that love could turn into something sharp and cutting, something that left wounds you couldn't see but felt every single day. The change had been gradual at first. Marcus withdrawing during circle time, Marcus pushing other children on the playground, Marcus erupting into tears over minor frustrations that other kids brushed off easily. By 2nd grade, he was spending more time in the principal's office than in his classroom. By 3rd grade, teachers were whispering about interventions and behavioral support plans, and whether Marcus belonged in a different kind of school. What none of them understood was that Marcus wasn't trying to be difficult. He was trying to survive the chaos inside his own chest. Every morning, he woke up to the sound of his parents arguing over phone calls about custody schedules and child support payments. Every evening, he fell asleep to his mother crying in the next room. The anger wasn't something he chose. It was something that lived inside him now, feeding on every disappointment, every rejection, every moment when he felt invisible and unwanted. St. Catherine's Elementary had been his refuge once. The red brick building with its tall windows and peaceful hallways had felt like sanctuary compared to the battlefield his home had become. But even that safety had crumbled as his behavior spiraled. Teachers who once smiled warmly now watched him with wary eyes. Children who used to invite him to birthday parties crossed to the other side of the hallway when they saw him coming. The statue of the Virgin Mary had been installed in the courtyard in 1993, a gift from the graduating class that year. It had been carved by a local artist from a single block of Carrara marble, the same stone used by masters like Michelangelo. The artist had spent months perfecting every detail, the gentle curve of her hands, the peaceful expression on her face, the way her robes seemed to flow despite being frozen in stone. For 30 years, that statue had stood as the heart of St. Catherine's spiritual life. Children had prayed there during difficult times. Teachers had found moments of peace there between challenging days. Parents had whispered desperate hopes there while waiting for parent-teacher conferences about their struggling children. The statue had witnessed thousands of stories. It had been present for playground-scraped knees and heartbroken teenage crushes. It had stood silent during emergency lockdowns and celebrated during graduation ceremonies. Snow had covered it in winter. Spring flowers had bloomed around its base. Summer sunshine had warmed its marble surface. Autumn leaves had gathered at its feet. But never, in all those years, had it been struck with such pure, desperate rage by such a small, broken heart. And never had it responded the way it did that Tuesday afternoon when Marcus's foot connected with stone and something impossible began to unfold. The first sign that something had fundamentally changed came at dawn the next morning. Sister Margaret, the school principal, always arrived at St. Catherine's before sunrise, but that Wednesday morning something was different. As she walked through the courtyard, she noticed a soft glow emanating from the Virgin Mary statue, not the harsh glare of security lights or the warm flicker of candles. This was something else entirely. A gentle, pearl-white radiance that seemed to come from the marble itself. Sister Margaret rubbed her eyes, certain that exhaustion was playing tricks on her vision. When she looked again, the light had faded, leaving only the familiar silhouette in the pre-dawn darkness. She made a mental note to check the lighting system, then hurried inside to begin her day. But the strangeness was only beginning. In Mrs. Rodriguez's third-grade classroom, Marcus Henderson sat quietly at his desk, the first time in months that he hadn't disrupted morning announcements. His usual restless energy had been replaced by an unusual stillness. When Mrs. Rodriguez asked the class to share something they were grateful for, Marcus raised his hand for the first time all year. "I'm grateful that hurting people can still find peace," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Rodriguez felt a chill run down her spine. Those weren't words that typically came from 8-year-old children, especially not from Marcus. She studied his face, searching for signs of his usual defiance. Instead, she found something that unsettled her even more, a depth in his eyes that seemed far too mature for his young face. During recess, other teachers began to notice changes as well. Marcus didn't pick fights or storm off to isolated corners of the playground. Instead, he sat quietly near the statue, occasionally reaching out to touch its base with gentle fingers. When younger children approached him, children who had learned to keep their distance, he spoke to them with unexpected kindness. "Marcus told me that sometimes broken things get fixed in ways we can't see," 6-year-old Emma told her teacher after recess. The teachers exchanged worried glances. Emma's mother was battling cancer, a fact that Marcus couldn't possibly have known. How had he understood exactly what she needed to hear? By Thursday morning, the reports became impossible to ignore. The night custodian mentioned seeing unexplained shadows moving around the statue during his evening rounds. The security footage showed strange distortions in the area around the Virgin Mary, not equipment malfunctions, but visual anomalies that the technology couldn't properly capture. And then there was the statue itself. Mrs. Chen, who had walked past the statue thousands of times over her 20-year career, was the first to notice it. The marble surface, which had been weathered and dulled by decades of exposure, now seemed to possess an inner luminosity. The carved features appeared more defined, more lifelike. The expression on the Virgin's face, while still serene, carried a subtle warmth that hadn't been there before. That afternoon, as the last students boarded their buses, Sister Margaret found herself standing alone in the courtyard, staring at the statue that had suddenly become the center of everything inexplicable. What she discovered next would force her to question everything she thought she knew about faith, miracles, and the boundaries between heaven and earth. Sister Margaret had watched the security footage 17 times. 17 times she had studied those grainy images, searching for some rational explanation. 17 times she had hoped the next viewing would reveal a technical glitch or her tired eyes playing tricks. But the footage remained the same: impossible, inexplicable, undeniable. The video showed Marcus approaching the statue at exactly 2:47 p.m. on Tuesday afternoon. His small figure moved with jerky, angry motions. The timestamp ticked forward: 2:47:12, 2:47:15, 2:47:18. And then came the moment of impact. Marcus's foot connected with the statue base at 2:47:23. The violent force of the kick, his entire body putting everything into that single, furious strike against marble that had stood unchanged for 3 decades. But what happened next defied every law of physics Sister Margaret had known for her 71 years. The statue didn't just absorb the impact. It didn't crack or chip. Instead, in the single frame immediately following contact, something extraordinary occurred. The marble figure seemed to shift. Not a physical movement that could be measured, but something far more profound. The statue appeared to lean forward slightly, as if bending toward the angry child. The carved hands, extended in offering for 30 years, seemed to lower imperceptibly, as if reaching to embrace such desperate pain. Sister Margaret had brought in the technology coordinator to examine the footage. She had called the security company. She had even contacted the original artist who carved the statue. "I carved her to be compassionate," the old artist had said, "but I never carved her to move." If this story is pulling you in, subscribe now and tell me in the comments what you believe is really happening. Your insight might reveal something we haven't seen yet. The investigation deepened as more witnesses came forward. The school nurse admitted seeing strange lights flickering around the statue during late evenings. The lunch ladies mentioned feeling unusual peace emanating from that corner of the grounds. But most disturbing were the accounts from children themselves. 7-year-old Michael Thompson told his mother he had seen the stone lady nodding at him. 9-year-old Sophia Martinez insisted she heard soft humming from the Virgin Mary during recess. And then there was Jessica Wu. Jessica was a quiet 5th grader struggling with severe anxiety. She had been having panic attacks for weeks. On Thursday afternoon, during what seemed like another episode, something unprecedented occurred. Walking past the statue, familiar tightness began building in her chest. But instead of running to the nurse's office, she found herself drawn to sit on the bench near the Virgin Mary. The moment she sat down, Jessica felt an inexplicable wave of calm wash over her. The panic simply vanished. Not gradually, but instantaneously, as if someone had flipped a switch. "I felt like someone was hugging me," Jessica told her mother. "Something bigger, something that knew exactly how scared I was." Sister Margaret sat in her office that evening, surrounded by witness statements and 17 printed frames from the security footage. The evidence pointed to something that challenged not just her understanding of physics, but her comprehension of how heaven might reveal itself. And tomorrow, she would have to decide what to do with a truth that no one would believe. The critical revelation came on Friday morning, when Sister Margaret examined the security footage frame by frame. Studying each individual moment with forensic precision, What she discovered would haunt her for the rest of her life. At normal speed, the statue's response appeared subtle, almost imperceptible, but examined frame by frame, the movement became undeniably clear. In the exact moment of impact, frame 2:47:23:15, the marble surface seemed to ripple like water disturbed by a stone, but flowing in reverse. Instead of absorbing the violence, the statue appeared to be channeling something back into Marcus. A visible energy, captured in grainy footage, seemed to flow from the Virgin Mary's extended hands directly into the child's small body. But the most shocking discovery came 3 frames after impact. Marcus's face, twisted with rage just moments before, suddenly changed. His expression shifted from fury to something else entirely. Wonder, peace, a recognition that seemed impossible for an 8-year-old boy. Sister Margaret had to pause the video and step away. In all her years of faith, she had prayed for signs, hoped for miracles, but seeing it captured in digital pixels was overwhelming. Meanwhile, Marcus's transformation was becoming impossible to ignore. On Friday morning, he approached Tommy Martinez, a kindergartner, crying because he forgot his lunch money. Instead of walking past, Marcus sat down beside the younger boy. "My mom forgets things when she's sad too," Marcus said gently. "But being hungry isn't as bad as being alone. Want to share my sandwich?" Mrs. Peterson, who witnessed the exchange, later told Sister Margaret she had to excuse herself to cry. The compassion in Marcus's voice, the mature understanding of emotional pain, none of it matched the angry, isolated boy they had known. During afternoon recess, something even more extraordinary happened. Amanda Ross, a 4th grader with cerebral palsy who used a wheelchair, was sitting alone near the playground equipment. Marcus noticed her isolation and, without any adult prompting, walked over and sat beside her. "Do you want to tell me about the book you're reading?" he asked. Amanda, often too shy to speak to classmates, lit up at his genuine interest. They spent the entire recess in animated conversation about fantasy novels. "He talked to me like I was just normal," Amanda told her mother that evening, tears of joy streaming down her face. Perhaps the most profound change was visible in Marcus himself. The constant tension in his shoulders had melted away. The defensive posture, fists clenched, jaw tight, eyes darting for threats, had been replaced by an openness that seemed to radiate from within. On Friday afternoon, as parents arrived for pickup, Marcus did something that left everyone speechless. He walked up to Sister Margaret and simply said, "Thank you." "For what, Marcus?" she asked, kneeling to his eye level. "For having her here," he said, gesturing toward the statue. "She helped me understand that being angry was just another way of asking for love." Sister Margaret felt her breath catch. Those were not the words of an 8-year-old child. They were the words of someone who had experienced a profound spiritual awakening. The statue had not just moved, it had healed, it had transformed. It had taken a broken, angry child and somehow made him whole again. And the security camera had captured every impossible moment. The discovery that would change everything came on Monday morning, when Marcus began speaking about conversations that should have been impossible. It started during morning prayer in Mrs. Rodriguez's classroom. When it was Marcus's turn to share a prayer intention, something extraordinary happened. "I want to pray for Mrs. Chen's mother," Marcus said quietly. "She's very sick in the hospital, and Mrs. Chen is scared she won't get better. She cries in her car before school every morning." The classroom fell silent. Mrs. Rodriguez felt her heart skip. Mrs. Chen had not told anyone about her mother's sudden hospitalization over the weekend. More unsettling, Marcus couldn't possibly have seen Mrs. Chen crying. His mother dropped him off at the front entrance, while Mrs. Chen parked behind the building. During lunch, Marcus approached Sarah Williams, the 3rd grade teacher supervising the cafeteria. She had been struggling all weekend with whether to accept a job offer in another state. "You don't have to be afraid of new places," Marcus said, seemingly from nowhere. Sometimes the Virgin Mary puts opportunities in front of us because she knows we're ready, even when we don't feel ready. Sarah stared at the 8-year-old in shock. She had told no one about the job offer, but the most profound moment came during recess, when Marcus sought out Jessica Wu, the 5th grader who had experienced mysterious calm near the statue days before. "She wants you to know that the scared feeling in your chest isn't yours," Marcus told Jessica as they sat near the Virgin Mary statue. "It's your mum's worry that you've been carrying, but you don't have to carry it anymore." Jessica's eyes widened. Her mother had indeed been battling severe anxiety since losing her job, but they had never discussed it openly. "Who told you that?" Jessica whispered. Marcus looked toward the statue with impossibly mature eyes. "The lady. She sees everything that hurts people, and she wants to help fix it. She talks to me sometimes when I'm quiet enough to listen." Word of Marcus's mysterious insights spread quickly through the faculty. Teachers began sharing their own experiences, moments when Marcus had somehow known about their private struggles, unspoken fears, deepest concerns. Mrs. Patterson, the school nurse, revealed that Marcus had approached her with a message about her depressed teenage son. "She says he's not broken," Marcus had told her, "just lost, and lost things can always be found when someone loves them enough to keep looking." Sister Margaret found herself documenting these encounters, trying to find rational explanations for how an 8-year-old could possess such intimate knowledge about adults he barely interacted with. But the more accounts she gathered, the more impossible it became to deny what was happening. Marcus wasn't just transformed, he was connected to something that transcended normal human perception. He was receiving information and wisdom from a source beyond the physical world. And that source, according to Marcus himself, was speaking to him through the statue of the Virgin Mary, the same statue that had mysteriously responded to his violent kick days before. The question that haunted Sister Margaret was no longer whether something supernatural was occurring at St. Catherine's. The question was what she was supposed to do with a miracle that was changing lives and challenging every assumption about the boundaries between heaven and earth. The emotional confrontation that would heal an entire family began when Marcus's parents arrived at St. Catherine's for an emergency meeting. They expected another discussion about behavioral problems. Instead, they walked into a revelation that would shatter everything. David and Lisa Henderson sat across from Sister Margaret's desk, familiar disappointment heavy between them. For months, these meetings had followed the same pattern. Reports of Marcus's anger, barely concealed blame flowing between two people who had forgotten how to love each other. But this time, Sister Margaret's expression was different. Instead of concern, there was awe. "What you're about to see will challenge everything you believe about your son," she said, turning her computer screen toward them. The security footage played in slow motion. David and Lisa watched their 8-year-old approach the statue with rage they recognized. They saw his violent kick connect with marble. They saw the impossible response. Then they saw their son's face transform from hatred to wonder in 3 frames. "This is impossible," David whispered. Sister Margaret told them about Marcus's mysterious insights, his impossible knowledge of others' private pain, his conversations with the lady. She shared testimony from teachers who had witnessed their son demonstrating wisdom beyond his years. Lisa sat in stunned silence, tears streaming. "We did this to him. All our fighting. We broke our little boy." They found Marcus sitting near the Virgin Mary statue, peaceful in a way they hadn't seen in years. When he looked up at his parents approaching together, something that hadn't happened in months, his eyes filled with pure love. "I know why you've been so angry at each other," Marcus said quietly. "The lady told me. You're not really mad. You're scared." David knelt down, voice trembling. "What are we scared of, buddy?" "You're scared you're not good enough to be my dad because your dad left when you were little," Marcus said, touching David's face gently. "And Mommy's scared that if she loves too much, it'll hurt when it goes away, just like when Grandpa died." Lisa gasped. Marcus was talking about her father's death, the loss that had triggered her emotional withdrawal. But being scared doesn't mean you have to hurt each other, Marcus continued. The lady says scared people either fight or hide, but love means choosing to be brave enough to stay close even when it's scary. David looked at Lisa across their son's small form, seeing her clearly for the first time in months. Not the woman battling him, but the woman terrified of losing anyone else she loved. "I've been so angry," David whispered, "but you're right. I was scared of failing you both." Lisa reached across and took David's hand. "I've been so afraid of getting hurt that I hurt the two people I love most." Marcus smiled with serenity that radiated from far beyond his years. "She says that's what forgiveness is for. Not for when people are perfect, but for when people choose love instead of being scared." As afternoon sun cast golden light across the courtyard, 3 broken people sat together near a statue that had become the catalyst for a miracle. Watching from her window, Sister Margaret witnessed something that defied explanation, a family being healed by mysterious intervention. But what she saw next would convince her that the miracles at St. Catherine's were just beginning. The profound consequences began rippling through St. Catherine's community in ways no one could have predicted. What started with one broken child had awakened something that seemed to call to every wounded soul within the school's walls. It began when 7-year-old Emma Rodriguez, who struggled with anxiety about her mother's cancer treatments, found herself drawn to the courtyard. Instead of heading to the counselor's office as usual, she sat near the Virgin Mary statue. Mrs. Patterson, the school nurse, noticed Emma sitting perfectly still, eyes closed, completely calm. When Emma opened her eyes 20 minutes later, she looked up with serenity far too mature for her years. "My mom is going to be okay," Emma said quietly. "The lady told me. She said sometimes bodies get sick so that hearts can learn how strong love really is." Mrs. Patterson felt a chill. These were not the words of a frightened 7-year-old. By Friday, word had spread among students through whispered conversations and an inexplicable knowing that something sacred was happening. 10-year-old Jake Morrison, struggling with behavioral issues since his parents' divorce, began spending lunch periods near the statue. His outbursts decreased dramatically. Most remarkably, he started showing compassion to younger students being bullied. Mia Chen, a 5th grader battling depression, found herself drawn to the courtyard during recess. She would sit near the statue, leaving each session with what her teacher described as a light in her eyes that hadn't been there for months. The most profound change came with Ashley Torres, a 4th grader with severe autism who rarely spoke. One afternoon, she walked up to Marcus and initiated conversation. "She talks to you too, doesn't she?" Ashley asked, pointing to the statue. Marcus nodded, eyes wide with recognition. "You can hear her?" "She told me I'm not broken," Ashley whispered. "She said different isn't the same as wrong." From that day forward, Ashley began speaking more frequently, participating in class discussions, even making friends, something her parents had never thought possible. Sister Margaret documented these transformations with awe and growing concern. The changes were undeniably positive, but also undeniably supernatural. During faculty meetings, teachers shared observations. Discipline problems had virtually disappeared. Students showed unusual kindness toward each other. Requests for emotional support had dropped 60%. Perhaps most striking was what happened during weekly prayer services. Traditionally, children recited prayers by rote, attention wandering. Now, when the student body gathered, their focus turned naturally toward the courtyard where the statue stood. Their prayers became spontaneous, heartfelt, surprisingly mature. They prayed for sick family members, for understanding between feuding friends, for comfort for struggling classmates. They prayed with compassion that seemed to come from far beyond their young years. Sister Margaret stood watching children who had been broken, angry, and lost just weeks before now, radiating peace and love. What she witnessed was no longer an isolated miracle involving one troubled boy. What she witnessed was an entire school community being transformed by something that existed far beyond human understanding. And she knew that the world needed to know what was happening at St. Catherine's Elementary. 5 years have passed since that September afternoon when an 8-year-old boy's foot connected with marble and changed everything. Today, Marcus Henderson is 13, a quiet teenager whose eyes still carry that impossible depth that first appeared in the security footage. The transformation has endured in ways that continue to astound everyone who knew him before. Marcus's rage never returned. In its place grew a compassion so profound that teachers at his middle school seek his advice when dealing with troubled students. "He has this way of seeing straight into people's pain," says Mrs. Anderson, his counselor. "Kids who won't talk to adults will open up to Marcus." David and Lisa Henderson renewed their wedding vows 2 years ago in the same courtyard where their family found healing. Their marriage, once shattered by fear and anger, has become something stronger than either thought possible. "We learned that love isn't something you fall into," Lisa reflects. "It's something you choose, especially when choosing it is scary." David now volunteers at St. Catherine's, helping other divorced parents. Sometimes our greatest failures become the doorway to our greatest healing. St. Catherine's Elementary has become something of a pilgrimage site for families dealing with childhood behavioral issues. Parents travel from across the country, drawn by stories of miraculous transformations, but the mysteries continue. The statue itself has never been the same since that September afternoon. Visitors often comment on its unusual luminosity, the way marble seems to glow with inner light that photography cannot capture. Children still gather around the statue during recess, drawn by something they cannot name but instinctively understand. Teachers report that these children consistently show improved emotional regulation, increased empathy, and spiritual maturity that defies their age. Sister Margaret, now in her mid-70s, has kept meticulous records of every unexplained healing. Her files contain over 300 documented cases of children finding peace, families reconciling, and hearts healing. "I've been a nun for 52 years, Sister Margaret says. "I've prayed for miracles, hoped for signs, but witnessing it, really witnessing it, changes you in ways that faith alone never could." Marcus himself rarely speaks about his conversations with the lady, but those close to him say that connection continues. His parents occasionally find him sitting quietly in their backyard garden, head tilted as if listening to something only he can hear. "I don't think about it as special anymore," Marcus says. "Maybe we're all supposed to be able to hear that voice of love. Maybe most of us just forgot how to listen." The security camera that captured the impossible moment still operates, still watches over the courtyard where children continue to find healing. But since that September afternoon, no camera has captured anything as dramatic as what happened when an angry 8-year-old's foot met marble. The statue stands today exactly where it stood 5 years ago, hands still extended in offering, face still serene. But those who spend time in its presence know that something fundamental changed in that moment of impact. Something that continues to change lives, heal families, and prove that miracles are present realities waiting to unfold in the most unexpected moments. The story of what happened at St. Catherine's Elementary could have ended with the healing of one broken family. But miracles, like ripples in still water, reach far beyond their point of origin. Today, 10 years after that September afternoon, the courtyard looks much the same as when Marcus Henderson first approached the Virgin Mary statue with fury in his heart. The same oak trees cast familiar shadows. The same marble statue stands in the quiet corner, hands extended in eternal offering. But everything has changed. The bench where Marcus once sat now bears a small brass plaque, in honor of all the children who find healing here. It was placed by former students whose lives were touched by the inexplicable events that began with one boy's desperate kick. Sister Margaret, now retired, maintains her vigil as keeper of the miracles. Her documentation has grown to fill 3 large file cabinets, containing thousands of accounts from families whose children found peace in the statue's presence. People ask me if I ever doubt what I witnessed, Sister Margaret says, but you can't doubt something that continues to happen. Just last month, a 9-year-old girl named Sophia arrived carrying trauma from her parents' bitter custody battle. Within a week, teachers noticed her gravitating toward the courtyard. Within a month, she was helping other children through difficult moments. Marcus Henderson, now 18 and preparing for college, still visits occasionally. When he does, current students approach him, drawn by something they sense but cannot name. He looks at them with such understanding, observes Mrs. Chen. It's like he can see straight into their hearts. The mystery of the statue itself has deepened over the years. Art historians, scientists, and religious scholars have all examined it, searching for explanations. None have found answers that satisfy the rational mind. But the children don't need scientific explanations. They are drawn by something far more profound, by recognition that here, broken things can be made whole. The security camera that captured the impossible moment still records everything. The footage now documents decade after decade of small miracles, quiet healings, and transformations that begin with children simply sitting in the presence of something greater than themselves. What began with one angry child kicking marble has become a legacy of hope touching new lives every day. Parents bring troubled children from across the country, not seeking magic, but hoping for quiet miracles that change hearts from the inside out, and they find it in children who learn to forgive, in families healing from pain and fear, in the transformation of anger into compassion, despair into hope, isolation into connection. The statue of the Virgin Mary stands today as she stood when first carved, hands extended, face serene, offering comfort to all who approach. But those who spend time in her presence know she is no longer just marble. She has become a doorway between heaven and earth, where wounded hearts remember how to heal. As the sun sets each evening over the courtyard, the statue's luminous presence continues watching over new generations, waiting for the next broken heart that needs mending, the next lost soul that needs finding, the next miracle that needs to unfold. If this story moved you, subscribe to Virgin Mary Mysteries so you never miss the next chapter in these extraordinary mysteries.